There's a curious sight in the Mojave Desert, a graveyard of sorts for airplanes. Since we were all born into a time when airplanes already existed, they don't seem exciting, new. Their golden age was over long ago. Even though it's only been a few decades since flying became possible, our opinion of it has quickly swung from fascination to frustration. As we get lost in the details of the process, it's easy to forget how extraordinary it is that we can fly so far, so fast, or that we can even fly at all. For the moment, leave behind everything you know about airplanes, anything you've heard about their history, every conclusion you've drawn from your own experience, and prepare to see them again for the first time. All of human history has taken place here. But for most of our history, we didn't know the true size of our planet. In an earlier time, long before we could fly, there was no easy way to get around. There was no infrastructure, nor for that matter, any kind of transportation. Traveling from one distant place to another wasn't a matter of hours or days. It was a matter of lifetimes. To put things into perspective, we need to go back and trace our 200,000-year journey to the present. We began in Africa, the starting point of our migration. We set out on foot and braved the elements, making our way across the planet. Eventually, we made it to 6 continents. The last place we settled was at the southern tip of South America, the farthest point from Africa that could be reached by land. And it took us tens of thousands of years to get there. In ancient times, we rarely traveled more than 20 miles from where we were born. We saw more of the universe than we did of our own home, which is why we mapped the sky long before the Earth. Without any way to meet, entire civilizations would rise and fall, without ever knowing of each other's existence. If we look at our history over the last 200,000 years, it's amazing to see just how long walking was our only means of transportation. Our first breakthrough? The wheel. Attaching it to animals helped us get around more easily, but they could only go so fast and so far. Throughout most of the last 5,000 years, our top speed on land remained the same. When we mastered the sea, travel became faster, but our world became larger. We connected 6 continents, and for the first time, created a map of the world. Now, if we fast forward to just 200 years ago, practically yesterday on the timeline of human history, traveling through the air seemed no closer to becoming a reality. When our movement was limited, so were our options. This was how things were, until we invented a machine that redefined speed. Instead of harnessing power, we created our own. When we put the steam engine on wheels, our lives really began to accelerate. Over time, bigger engines enabled us to travel farther, but most long-distance trips were still one way. A new kind of horsepower allowed us to connect thousands of small towns that trains couldn't reach. But no single mode of transportation could cross both land and sea. Then, less than 100 years after we connected an engine to a wheel, we made a breakthrough that left the obstacles of the Earth behind. Airplanes liberated us from the ground. Unlike cars and trains, they didn't need elaborate infrastructure. Just a place to take off and land. We didn't know it at the time, but that moment we took to the skies marked the beginning of a revolution. In just a flicker of time, life on Earth changed forever. In a single century, aviation went from impossible to nearly perfected. On any given day, there are more than 100,000 takeoffs and landings. At any moment in time, 250,000 of us are in the sky. The network of airplanes is practically invisible, yet their constant circulation is the lifeblood of the modern world. When we enter an airport, we're entering a portal to the planet. Each gate is a doorway to another part of the world. In a sense, we're walking distance to almost anywhere. On the savannas of Africa, not much has changed in the last 200,000 years. But something does look different. Now, when we leave Africa, we're no longer limited in how far we can go. As we fly through the air, we can retrace the path of our migration and touch down anywhere along the way. the southern tip of South America, the end point of our migration. The locals call it Fin del Mundo, the end of the world. Like everywhere else, it's not that hard to get to anymore. Even from Africa, it takes us less than a day. What was once a migration is now a vacation. Our ability to reach distant places has an even deeper significance. We bridge the gap that once separated and isolated entire cultures. We can go anywhere that anyone has ever lived. We go beyond what we've learned about our history and set foot in the very places where it unfolded. The airplane is the closest thing we've ever had to a time machine. Over the last century, entire regions of the world have been unlocked, even places without airports. There's a country off the coast of India that's made up of 1,200 tiny islands. Most of the islands are too small for runways, and their surrounding waters are too shallow for ships. The seaplane keeps this island country connected. Part plane, part boat, it bridges the sky and the ocean. It goes anywhere a boat can go, and some places a boat can't. Because seaplanes can touch down just about anywhere, we can reach every part of this country. In the age of airplanes, we've become explorers once again. Antarctica, one of the last places on Earth to be mapped. While it may look flat, it's one of the most mountainous continents. Its rocky terrain is hidden beneath a mile thick of ice. Only the tallest peaks are visible. And what appears to be solid ground is deceptive. Deep cracks in the ice are concealed by thin layers of snow, creating deadly trapdoors. Crossing the surface of Antarctica is virtually impossible. But the challenges of the terrain have only fueled our curiosity. Very few people have ever visited Antarctica's isolated interior. Even more elusive is the South Pole itself, the true end of the world, which is still hundreds of miles farther in. Before we could fly there, only 5 people ever made it and survived the return trip. We've transformed the South Pole from a place where nothing could survive to a place that supports an international community of scientists year-round. A new chapter of exploration is just beginning. Aviation's influence is all around us, but much of it is never seen. Even something as simple as a flower is linked to the airplane. Since flowers are perishable, they used to be sold only in the country where they grew. Now, we buy flowers from around the world, no matter where they're grown or where we live. But once they're cut, it's a race against time. For these roses, beauty lasts 14 days. The next stop, 4,000 miles away. Five million flowers fly to the Netherlands daily. They're imported from 60 countries. By midday, all flowers must leave the building. But their journey is far from over. Every night, flowers, along with millions of other items, board flights to thousands of destinations. By this time tomorrow, many of these packages will be oceans apart. These roses from Kenya have flown 12,000 miles. They've gone from summer to winter, and they still have 10 more days to live. Although not everything in our homes is flown in, we may not realize how many things we own from faraway places. On this table alone, there are items from 6 continents. As the speed of transportation has increased, everything's become closer. In this store, there are more than 7,000 watches. Each one of them flew here. Our local shopping centers have become global markets. No monarch in history ever had so much to choose from. Everywhere we go, we find pieces of everywhere else. At first glance, Las Vegas is merely a collection of monuments to monuments. But the city is significant in its own right. It's become an international crossroads, the most popular meeting spot on Earth. Before there were international airports, international conventions weren't possible. Las Vegas has more space for meeting halls than for casinos. It's the convention capital of the world. Of all the things that happen here, one of the most profound is the convergence of ideas. When we work together and combine our discoveries, we achieve much more than we ever could on our own. The outcomes of hundreds of conventions impact more than just the people who attend. They even affect those who've never flown. And the faster that people and their ideas can connect with each other, the faster the progress of the modern world. We're truly living in a time of science fiction. Ironically, the experience of flying doesn't always feel so impressive. When we're speeding through the sky, it can feel like we're going nowhere. But it's likely the fastest we'll ever move in our lives. As we find ways to pass the time, we're carried across continents and oceans, the same ones that challenged even the boldest explorers. At 35,000 feet, we just sit back and go along for the ride. Since there's no close alternative to the speed of air travel, if we couldn't fly, we probably wouldn't go. And if we didn't go, imagine how different our lives would be. As we float along to our destination, with the shades closed to the outside world, it's easy to overlook one of aviation's greatest gifts. This view is unique to our time in history. We see more in a single glance than people once saw in a lifetime. We tend to romanticize the past and feel nostalgic for the way things used to be. At the same time, we're eager for what the future holds, the promise of something better. But as we go about our fast-paced lives, sometimes the hardest thing to do is to slow down and appreciate the time we're living in. In its own way, every era is a golden age. It's just a matter of perspective. In the world we've made, everything is connected, and nothing seems impossible. No virtual technology can ever do what the airplane does. It allows us to stay physically close to the people and places we love. And of all the places an airplane can take us, perhaps the most meaningful is home.